All right. Hello again, Avengers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number 271, and today I'm recording this at a time that I do not want to be awake. But I went to bed last night at like 2 or 3 in the morning, which is kind of normal for me, and woke up 2 hours later due to having a panic attack from a nightmare. And I haven't been able to sleep since, so I'm going to try and do something productive and make a video. And the thing I wanted to talk about today, mentioned a while back, Geek and Sundry seems to be returning. And the first thing that they were returning with was this show called Goblin Mode, which is a live play podcast that they're partnering with another company to do. 3 episodes of it are up already. I completely missed when it launched because I forgot to subscribe to the channel. But yesterday, or the day before, I think, I saw another thing that I thought was interesting. Geek and Sundry has another new show that they are doing, which is basically a Pokemon trading card game show where they bring celebrities on to play the Pokemon trading card game. And that's what it is. Years ago, they had on Geek and Sundry, they had a show called Spell Slingers. And Spell Slingers was a thing where Day 9, Sean Plott, would play Magic the Gathering with celebrity guests. And if you've never watched Spell Slingers, I think it still exists on Geek and Sundry. If it doesn't, then that really, really sucks. It was awesome. It was so good. Sean Plott, Day 9, whatever you want to call him, he is such a good host. And probably the best thing about that show is Sean Plott really loves Magic the Gathering. He really enjoys playing it. And he didn't play it super, super well, which was hilarious to watch. Now, sometimes it was his deck screwing him over. A lot of times it was he just got outplayed. It was a great show. So I assumed that the Pokemon TCG show, which I'm going to look up what it's actually called, because it has a name. And it has insanely high production value, and this is going to be one of the things I want to talk about here. Let's go. Geek and Sundry. There we go. Geek and Sundry, and you might hear... Oh, they don't have it. Good. Thank God. Alright, so... The show itself is called Stellar Crown Showdown, which I think is the name of the newest Ixis expansion for the Pokemon TCG. In fact, I'm going to check to see. Yeah. So yeah, Pokemon TCG Scarlet and Violet Stellar Crown is, I'm assuming, the latest expansion to the Pokemon trading card game. So, the first thing that I think everybody needs to understand about Stellar Crown Showdown is Stellar Crown Showdown is an ad. It is a 22-minute and 26-second ad for the Pokemon trading card game, which is perfectly fine. Another thing that is just an ad is Acquisitions Incorporated. When it was first created, way back in 4th edition, the entire purpose of Acquisitions Incorporated was to sell D&D 4th edition, and it did spectacularly. That's why Acquisitions Incorporated, for a while, basically every time they did a big adventure, it was tied into whatever the latest book that was being dropped by Wizards of the Coast was. It's an ad. You want to know what else was just an ad? Transformers. Just an ad. The cartoon series, just an ad. Beast Wars as well, it's just an ad. So this is not to say that things that are designed to sell a product cannot be entertaining, cannot turn into something really, really good. I believe Spell Slingers was also just an ad. It was sponsored by Wizards of the Coast to make people play Magic the Gathering, and it was phenomenal. So the reason that I mention this thing that it is a 22-minute and 26-second ad is there are good ways to go about doing sponsored content, and there are bad ways to do it. And I think Stellar Crown Showdown misses the mark on quite a few different things. The first episode, I watched it in its entirety. Overall, for the most part, it was fun. But the vast majority of the fun that I had was Terry Crews. Their first guest is Terry Crews. If you don't know who he is, I don't know what rock you've been living under, but I hope it's pleasant for you. Terry Crews, former NFL linebacker, turned actor / host, and really kind of a role model for positive masculinity. He's an exceptionally masculine person. He's very, very muscular. He's a very, very large man in general. And he's a very, very manly man. And yet he's not overly aggressive. He's one of the kindest, most generous people that I've ever seen. Everyone that I know that has spent time with him says that he's an absolute delight. So I am a huge, huge Terry Crews fan. And Terry Crews does very, very well in this show. I'm not talking from a gameplay perspective. I'm talking from an entertainment value. Not only is he good at just being entertaining and having fun with the game, but he so quickly picks up basically how to sell the game. Like there's one moment, and I'm not going to spoil specifically, but there's one moment where he 100% is doing marketing work. Like there's no other way to explain it, and it's obvious that it wasn't like that wasn't his job. Like his job isn't to sell the game. His job is to be entertaining. It's the host's job to sell the game. We'll talk about the host in a second here. His job was just there to be entertaining, but he is such a good host, and he is so comfortable with the idea of entertainment as a business that he knew exactly what it was that he was supposed to be doing and just did it. I myself have done that before. I worked in sales for years, and I have been in situations where I have been a part of marketing events for companies that I didn't work for. And just from being in sales for as long as I was, I knew exactly what they would need to sell the product well. So again, this is not an unnatural thing, but it does kind of point to the fact that Terry Crews is just very, very good at what he does. The host, on the other hand, not so much. Give me a second here, because I need to click on it because I can't. I have an actual problem remembering names. Like, I think it's part of the brain damage I got from the benzos. I literally just cannot remember names. The reason I know Terry Crews' names is because I knew it before I was on the benzos. Basically, anything that happened before I was on the benzos, for the most part, I tend to remember. I had an exceptional memory back then. Nowadays, it's a toss-up if I can remember a name or not, and I cannot for the life of me remember this person's name. So I'm going to open up the video real quick. Hold on a second. All right, we are back. I just don't like having just random blips of someone else's video showing up in mine. All right, so the host, Allison, she even says her name, and I cannot remember it. If I mispronounce your name, I sincerely apologize. Allison Mattingly, I believe, is the way to pronounce it. But Allison Mattingly is the host, and she hasn't quite found her stride as a host in this particular format. And what I mean by that is, again, because this is an ad, there are certain things that have to be done. And one of the things that a lot of people don't quite understand about sponsored content and things like that is sponsored content is not just, oh, like when you do some sort of sponsored content, it's not just, oh, this stream is sponsored by blah, blah. Remember to click my link. A lot of sponsored content will actually have ad reads that you have to do. And depending on your relationship with the sponsor and your relationship, specifically your relationship with their marketing team, they may require you to read an exact ad read. Now, different people deal with this differently. Some sponsored content allows you to kind of put it in your own words, but sometimes you are required to read the exact words that they wrote because the marketing team has spent literally dozens, if not hundreds of hours constructing these copies, these ad reads. And they use very, very specific language because the word choice is extremely important in marketing in general. You have a very, very limited window to get people's attention, and so the exact words that you use is extremely important. And that comes and bites Allison in the butt quite a few times. The show itself is set up very similarly format-wise to Hot Ones. And what I mean by that is the game itself seems kind of secondary to the idea that they're there to, again, sell the product, and also there's like an interview aspect, which again is perfectly fine, but it comes off really, really poorly. There are parts in the show where Allison actually has note cards in front of her, Geek and Sundry branded note cards, which I remember those note cards fondly. Instead of her holding her hand or her cards in her hand, there will be scenes where you can very clearly see she is reading off of a note card. And basically, I think like half a dozen times during this thing, they'll do a turn each, and then she'll go, the Pokémon game, which that was another thing that just pissed me off the entire time. I don't know if this is something that's been pushed by the Pokemon Company in general, but people that play Pokemon call it Pokemon. People that don't call it Pokemon. And I've never understood why people pronounce it Pokemon. Because nobody that actually, the new Pokemon game. Nobody says, the new Pokemon game. And Terry Crews, throughout the thing, calls it Pokemon. But Alyssa, through the entire thing, Pokemon does this. And Pokemon always has a really good connection with this. Or Pokemon does this and this and this. Terry, how does this involve something in your life? I can't remember any of the questions that she asked, but they did feel very much like, if you've ever watched Hot Ones, the host of Hot Ones, which again, cannot remember his name for the life of me, the host of Hot Ones is known in the industry for being like this shy of stalker levels of creepy in the information that he's able to get about his guests. And so a lot of times they'll take a bite of a wing and then he'll go, hey, when you were 5 years old and you stubbed your toe and you said your first swear word, what do you think now, 50 years later, is your favorite swear word? And the people that are sitting there going, how the hell did you find that out? We don't know. There are theories as to how the host of the Hot Ones how the host of Hot Ones gets its information. Some people think that he's a wizard or a vampire or some kind of mythological creature that has mind control powers that can like delve into people's subconscious, and he just goes around like reading people's minds. There are other theories, but that's my favorite. So the same basic thing happens with this show where they will do something and then again she will have an ad read that has the actual question on there, and you will watch her do this because she doesn't have the questions memorized. Again, I've done very, very limited hosting. It is something that I wanted to get into because I actually really enjoy hosting. And I think I'm actually a pretty good host. I did a little bit of hosting when I was in college for like a talent show and stuff like that. It's actually something that I really, really enjoy. Now I can't do it because I don't have a brain. But it was something that I always wanted. And I've seen other people in hosting situations. Again, when you are hosting, you are working for whomever is putting on the show. And there will be times when you have very specific things that you have to say. It's not uncommon for hosts to have note cards or things like that if they do have a very specific thing like an ad read or a specific quote that they have to do or things like that. So it's not uncommon for a host to have something to read off of. But if you don't want it to sound robotic, you do have to have it for the most part memorized. And you basically just use the note card as a way to remind yourself, oh, are there specific words or something? It was very obvious to me personally that Allison was not comfortable enough with the questions to be able to relay them like anything other than, this is the words that I was supposed to read, Terry. And it comes off as very, very robotic and just disingenuous. Now, again, does that mean that Allison's a really bad host? No. Part of this, part of it can just be, it's really, really weird to meet celebrities. Like, it's, if you've never met a celebrity, especially someone like Terry Crews, where Terry Crews in and of himself, not only is he a celebrity, but he's kind of a larger than life figure, literally. He's very, very big. And he has done so many roles where he is just this incredibly, he's this incredibly large presence on screen. If you look at Brooklyn Nine-Nine, everything, he presents himself as this very, very large personality, in addition to just being a very large person in general. So it's very possible that Allison was simply just starstruck because, again, Terry Crews is a very large person. He's a big celebrity, and he has a very large personality that he uses very, 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 very well as a host. Having a large personality is really, really good for a host. Is it necessary? Absolutely not. Allison Hannigan was the host of Penn and Teller Fool Us for years. I don't know if she still is. Anyway, Allison Hannigan does not have a huge, boisterous personality, but she understands hosting really, really well, and she uses her own personality to be a very, very good host. She was never Terry Crews level of crazy, but she was really, really effective at it. So for Terry Crews to be in front of you, even if you live in LA and you work around people, you can get a little bit starstruck. So it might have just been nerves with this being the first episode and everything, and having Terry Crews as your first guest. It might just be nerves. Or it could be just that she wasn't given the time to be able to do the prep work that was necessary. I kind of doubt that one because, well, I guess maybe not. The production value for this, like, they built a set. They didn't just build a set. They built an extremely expensive set. The perfect example, The back wall has moving images on it the entire time. It's an animated back wall. And there's a number of different ways you could have done that. The easiest would be green screen. All the areas that are animated on the back wall could just be green cloth, and then you just put the images in there later. They do that in news, and they have been doing that for decades. The actual newsroom generally doesn't have anything behind them. And especially if you're like watching the weather where they have that whole wall where he's like pointing, and up in Flagstaff, it's going to be this. And then there's a cold weather pattern that's going to come down here. That's all done through green screen and has been done, again, like that for decades. So that is a method to do it. That's not how they did it. That was an actual live screen. And the reason I know this is because both Terry and Allison react to things happening on that screen. Having a wall-sized screen, even if they use something simple like a rear projector, which to me, that didn't seem like a rear. If anyone doesn't know, a rear projector is literally that. You have this fabric that's semi-translucent, and you have a projector behind it, and when it projects the image onto the screen, you can see it on the other side. But it's generally pretty easy to tell a rear projector thing. It's not that it's low quality or anything. It has a certain look to it. I think this was an actual, I don't know if it's like an LED screen or whatever, but it was an actual screen. They did the coin toss there. They did everything else on it. It was impressive, and something like that is not cheap. A rear screen projector is not an extremely cheap thing. So even if they did it that way, which again would technically be kind of the cheap way to do it, that would still be very, very expensive. If it was an actual full wall LED screen or a couple different LED screens, that's incredibly expensive. So the idea that they spent all of this money on the set and getting Terry Crews to come in, and there's two other people. One of them is the guy that plays Ned in from the Tom Holland Spider-Man trilogy. These are big name actors. I can't remember who the third person is because again, memory problems. But these are really, really big names. So they probably had a really, really large budget. And the idea of spending all this money on the budget and spending all this time and money to be able to get these celebrity guests and not giving the host enough time to be able to prep for it seems a little bit awkward to me. But also, having done work as an actor, it's impressive how often the amount of work it takes to do a live performance, even though this was filmed. It's really, really comical how a lot of people that just aren't actors don't quite understand how much time and effort is required to be able to do something like this, like presenting and hosting and things like that. Like a lot of people think, oh, you just go up there, you say a couple words, maybe read an ad read or something like that, and that's it. No, to do it properly, you have to rehearse the things that you're going to say. You have to actually do a lot of work. So, is it possible that Allison just didn't put in the amount of work that was necessary to be able to do this correctly? Technically, yes. I think it's equally as possible that she was just given everything without enough of a timeline to be able to do the prep work. And it's also theoretically possible. I am not familiar with Allison's work before this. I've never heard of her before. It's also very, very possible that if she came from a more traditional acting background and this is her first hosting opportunity, she may not have understood how different and how much prep work is necessary to host. So why she did it the way that she did, I can't tell you. I can't really tell you who's at fault. It could be a number of different things that all kind of just came together to create a bad experience. But I can tell you it was not a good hosting experience just in general. The questions come off as extremely robotic and don't feel good. Even when she's playing the game, it's obvious that she has certain things that she is required to say, and they just come out really, really wrong. And again, doing something like this, doing a almost 23-minute ad, is hard to make it sound natural. But if you watch someone like Trisha Hirschberger, Trisha got her start on YouTube back in SourceFed, back when SourceFed was a thing. And she has been doing hosting duties and stuff like that for ever since then. And she's absolutely phenomenal for it. Or things like Anna Prosser is another just really, really talented host. Or again, if we go back to Sean Plott was an exceptionally good host because he was able to do ad reads and stuff like that, but still make it sound like it was his voice saying it, his speech and mannerisms, while still saying the contractually obligated the things. And Allison just didn't do that. And again, it could just be a lack of experience. It could just be that, again, this wasn't a field that she's ever done before, and so she didn't quite understand exactly what it takes to be a host. But I can tell you from this first episode, she did not play her job as host very well. It didn't ruin the show for me. I still enjoyed the show for the most part, but her hosting was definitely a negative point. Now, the format of it in and of itself is not great. And the reason I say that is I played the Pokemon trading card game when it first came out. Like when Pokemon was getting really, really big in the US back in like 95, 96, somewhere around there. Maybe it was 97, I can't remember. It was in the late 90s. I remember I was in 5th grade when the Pokemon trading card game got big at my school. And I remember going out and buying the starter deck. I think the entire time that I played the Pokemon trading card game, I might have bought like 4 booster packs because my family was absolutely 100% poor. But I had the starter deck that had, it was a fighting deck versus, I can't remember what the second one was. I always used the fighting deck. And I remember it getting big. The Pokemon trading card game from then versus the Pokemon trading card game that you play now aren't the same game, are nothing like each other, except for the fact that the energy symbols are kind of similar. And that was one of the biggest issues I had with the show is the way that the Pokemon trading card game works is you have a board, and they actually sell these playmats because where you place things on the board is actually really, really important. Even more so than like in Magic the Gathering. There are certain areas where you put certain things. Pokemon, the trading card game, there are specific places on the table that you have to put certain things. But the way that you set up a Pokemon TCG game is you both draw 7 cards, and it's been a long time since I've done this. Either, I think before you draw your cards, you place 6 prizes. So you take cards out of your deck, and you put 6 of them face down in a specific spot on the board. And basically, every time you knock out a Pokemon, the way I remember it working is you would get a single prize. So in order to win a game, you had to knock out 6 Pokemon. That's not how they did to do it here. And you can have different numbers of prizes. Like you can go, well, let's just do a 4-prize match. Or a 2-prize match, or something like that. Most common that I always remember with were 6-prize and 4-prize. I don't think I've ever seen a game played with 2 prizes. But 6 and 4 were the 2 that I was most familiar with people playing. They were doing a 6-prize match. However, the next thing that you do, each player draws 7 cards, and they look in their hand, and they look for a basic Pokemon. In order for you to be able to keep your hand, you have to have at least 1 basic Pokemon, and you take your first basic Pokemon and you put it in the active spot, which again is a very specific place on the board. And so the first round, before the game even begins, each character has to declare who their starting Pokemon is, and then if you have other basic cards in your hand, you can place them on your bench. Then there's a coin toss to decide who goes first, and then the game starts playing. This initial setup phase doesn't happen in the game. They do the coin toss because the very beginning, they open up some booster packs. They don't actually show you anything that they got from those booster packs. They just go, oh, we're going to open some booster packs. Montage of random people opening stuff, looking through cards that is too fast for you to see. And they go, if you want to see what it is, follow us on Instagram and TikTok. So apparently they did film them actually looking at the cards that they got. But they didn't want to show it in here. They wanted to show it somewhere else. Fine, that's a marketing thing. That's perfectly fine. You want people to visit other places. It's fine. And then they go directly from that to the coin toss. And they never tell us who the active Pokemon are. We don't see them set the prizes, which again, setting the prizes isn't really a big deal. We kind of see them draw the cards, but then it immediately cuts to the first turn, and they never tell us who the active Pokemon is. That's an issue. In order for the viewer to be able to follow who's winning and who's not, you need to know who the active Pokemon are, so you can kind of get an idea of what's going on. You eventually learn about the active Pokemon, but they kind of offhand mention it and all these other things. And another thing that was really, really weird to me is the first turn, Terry Crews goes first, and he goes, well, I have nothing that I can play. So he immediately just passes the turn, which, again, it's been a long time since I played the Pokemon TCG. But if on your first turn, and he only had his active Pokemon, he had nothing on his bench, that's a super, super bad first turn. Like, that is a phenomenally bad. You should bare minimum have an energy that you can play on your active Pokemon or be able to put another Pokemon on your bench, because there's two ways you can lose. One, your opponent gets all their prizes. Two, you run out of active Pokemon. If they knock out your active Pokemon and there's none on your bench, you instantly lose. The third way you can lose is you actually can't draw cards, which I don't know if that's still a thing anymore, because holy shit, was Terry Crews' deck a mill deck. He was drawing like 6 or 7 cards a turn. It was nonsense. If the game had gone on for like 1 or 2 more turns, he would have lost just because he had no cards left in his draw pile. So they don't show the initial setup. They don't explain how to play the game in any way, shape, or form. So someone that doesn't understand Pokemon, there's a really, really cool, hilarious video by, what's his name? I think it's ProZD or something like that. Let me see. Yeah, ProZD. He's Sungwon Cho. He's a YouTuber and he's also a voice actor. He has this bit that he does. It's a really old video where he's basically, it's a parody of Magic the Gathering, where basically he sits there and he's like, okay, I pass the turn to you. He's like, okay, I'm going to play my cow card, but that allows me to do this and this. And it turns into this like 20-minute long turn where he goes, now I'm going to take my milk cards and I'm going to play the fermentation affect, and that turns my milk cards into cheese, and I get 12 cheese tokens. Now I'm going to spend 3 of those cheese tokens to create a milk bar. And it's this really, and none of it makes sense. It's just gobbledygook that he's saying. And that's what half of the gameplay of this show is. They don't explain how anything works. They don't explain the abilities. It just seems like gobbledygook, where they're going, oh, you put energy and that means that this. Probably the best example of this, and this is the thing that totally told me that this is a completely different game than the game that I played. The Pokemon that he was using is a Pokemon that I know. I think it showed up, I think it first showed up in Sword and Shield. It's a dragon type Pokemon that lives in an apple. It's a little worm that lives in an apple. I love this Pokemon because it's adorable. but it's a little dragonfly thing that lives in an apple, and it uses pieces of the apple as its wings. Well, it evolves and gets really cool things. That was his kind of main Pokemon for this deck. The deck itself was built around this Pokemon. And the thing with this Pokemon's ability is it costs 2 colorless energy, which I find very, very strange because it's a grass type of a Pokemon, but sure, okay. Uses 2 colorless energy, and it does 30 points of damage times the number of grass energy attached to any Pokemon on your bench. And so the entire deck is built around just putting massive amounts of grass energy on your bench to be able to do these crazy, insane swings. The first attack that this Pokemon does something like 300 plus damage. In the old Pokemon, your first attack would do 10 damage, maybe 20 damage, not 330 damage. Like, it was nonsense how much damage this attack did. And they didn't explain anything. It's like, oh, well, it's he does damage based on this. Like, they had said that a couple times throughout the show. But they just go, yeah, and so I attack for 200 billion damage. It's like, wow, that's nonsense. The next time he uses the attack, Allison actually reaches over and counts each individual energy to show you where the calculation is coming. That should have happened the first time. From a training perspective, because again, if this video is designed entirely to target people that already play the game, it would have been, like, the ad reads would have been very, very different. This video is meant to get people interested in playing the game that haven't played it before. And they didn't teach people how the game works. And that's an essential part for getting people excited, because right now all they know is, oh, gobbledygook, 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 big numbers, and then you win. You need to at least teach enough of the rules so that people can follow what's going on. And they didn't. They didn't explain almost any rules whatsoever. Another thing I thought was weird, whenever they knocked out a Pokemon, they took 2 prizes instead of just 1 prize. I don't know if this is an optional rule that happens to kind of speed up play, or this was something that they just created for this show to make it go faster. But it was kind of weird to me. They never even explain what the prize system is. They never say what the prize system is, what's it supposed to do. They just kind of assume you know what it is. And so yeah, watching it was very, very difficult because, again, I know how the game is played somewhat. I haven't played in years, but I understand the very basics. You attach energy to Pokemon, and then they use that energy to do their attacks. Sometimes it involves discarding energy. Sometimes it doesn't, but that's the basics of how it goes. They never explain any of that. So anyone that doesn't have, and the Pokemon TCG is a remarkably complicated card game now because it's been out for over a decade. I think it's been out for like at least 20 years now. 20 years, it gets very, very complicated. So it's a remarkably complicated card game that they don't explain how it works. And it was obvious to me that Terry Crews either was doesn't play the Pokemon TCG regularly or had never played before, because he still required a little bit of coaching from Allison to be able to make the moves. So what I would assume probably happened is before they turned the cameras on, they gave Terry basically a really short, hey, this is how the game is played, this is what you want to be doing. And they probably would have explained his deck to him if they were smart. They would have gone, by the way, this deck is built on this and this and this and this. If they didn't do that, well, then that's another thing that would have caused an issue. But there's a large difference between given a 10-minute prep on, hey, this is how the game is played and this is how your deck works, to playing the game regularly and understanding how it works. So it was obvious to me that Terry didn't 100% understand how the game worked. but again, that's normal for a new player. And Allison, either they cut her explaining how anything works so that we never saw it on camera, or she simply just never explained to him how to play the game. She did every so often kind of tell him what to do, which from a training perspective is not a great thing. But that was the closest we got to any sort of instruction. And the thing that is brilliant about shows like this, where you bring someone on that doesn't understand how to play the game, is it gives you an excuse to be able to teach the game to the people watching, which again is important if you want to use this as an infection vector. If you want people to get into the game because of this, they have to have a basic understanding of how the game is played, and I just didn't. The other thing about the format that really, really messed me up, near the end of the show, Allison just goes on this weird kind of sidebar where she goes, well, I've done the math and everything, and I could take out this Pokemon, but I know that you have enough people on the bench that you're going to be able to take out my next Pokemon, because it got down to the point where Terry only had 2 prizes left. So he only needed to knock out 1 more Pokemon. So instead of playing those last 2 turns where she knocks out 1 Pokemon and then he knocks out her next Pokemon, she just goes, we're just going to give you the win. And that, in and of itself, felt really, really bad. It was one of those things like, why would you do that? So he didn't actually beat you. You gave up. That just feels really, really bad. So again, there's a lot of different reasons they might have done that. It might have been they were running out of time. Again, someone like Terry Crews, he has a schedule. And they probably scheduled him to shoot for a specific amount of time. And either because the people creating the show didn't schedule enough time to actually run a full game, or production just went longer than they thought it would be. Which again, both are very, very common. It was possible. My theory here is that they were probably just running out of time to be able to use Terry, and so they had to finish it up quick. And even though at that point the outcome was pretty much known, it was he was two turns away from winning. They decided to just, we're not going to actually play it out. We're just going to say that you win. It just really, really felt bad, especially since earlier in the episode, she mentions there are some decks that are built around kind of comebacks where you get, you start off in a really weak position, but then you, once you get a certain card, the entire control of the board changes. And so she says that earlier in the episode, and then, 10 minutes later goes, well, it's obvious that you got this in the bag, so we're not going to finish the game. I'm just going to say, hey, you win. Here's a gold sandwich. We won't get into that. And that in and of itself felt really, really weird. Because again, there really wasn't a reason why. Again, we came to watch Terry Crews play the Pokemon trading card game. Not to watch him play 2 or 3 rounds and then been given a trophy. It doesn't feel really good. Now again, there might be a billion different reasons why they decided to go in this particular thing. It might have been they literally did not have time to finish the game. It's very, very possible. Stuff like that happens all the time. This was a really, really poor way to deal with that, because if it was a time issue, instead of having a oh, that alarm tells me that we only have time for a single turn, so go ahead and take your final turn and then we'll decide who wins based on who has the better board position. Could have very simply done that, but they didn't. They just go, well, despite what I said earlier, where, some decks, like my deck that I'm playing specifically, is designed to be able to come back from really bad board positions, we're just going to give you the win. It just felt really, really weird. So overall, I had fun. I didn't have a lot of fun. I had enough fun. I'm going to watch the next one, see if it gets any better. But overall, the format in and of itself is not great. There's a lot of pop and pizzazz, but not a lot of substance. Which is great. I'm super, super happy that they made a good looking show. But if the only thing about this is that it looks good, congratulations, you made something very, very pretty. But it's not very entertaining. It's a little bit entertaining, but the vast majority of the entertainment from the episode came from Terry Crews just being fun to watch. Allison needs to work on her hosting skills. Again, this is not me saying she's a bad host and she shouldn't be the host. No, if this is your first hosting gig, congratulations. You've just discovered that hosting is difficult. And you really do need to put the effort and the work in to be better prepared next time. Sitting there and reading the ad read off like a robot is not okay. If you got the ad read like 10 minutes before cameras went live, that's not on you, Allison. That's on the production company. However, if you were given the materials to prep, even if you just had an hour to prep for this, an hour from someone that was working on becoming a working hour, getting an hour to prep for something is a lot of time. And yeah, like one of the best bits of advice I was given by my advisor when I first went to college as an acting major was, if you are ever given a script and they want you to do a cold read, your first question should always be, can I have 5 minutes? Because while you can develop cold reading skills, and I was actually pretty good at cold reading, doesn't matter how good you are at cold reading will never be your best performance. And any time you are auditioning, it should be your best performance. So your first question should always be, can I have 5 minutes? Can I have 10 minutes to just look this over? And in those, as much as the reason you go, can I have 5 minutes or can I have 10 minutes, is most places are not going to bat an eye at 5 minutes. Anything too much longer than that, like 10 minutes tends to be pushing it. Anything longer than that, they're just going to go, we're going with someone else. Like you won't even get a chance to read. You ask like, can I have like 20 minutes to look this over? They'll go, absolutely. Look it over when you go to your next audition. We don't want you. But 5 minutes is normally enough. And so being a working actor, you learn to prep really, really fast. So Allison, if they gave you the ad read and stuff like that, 10 minutes before camera goes live and you're doing other things, it's kind of, it's explainable why that particular delivery was so poor. But if you had it for more than maybe like half an hour to an hour, that's on you. You really should. If they give you something you know that you're going to have to read it, even if it's going to be on cue cards, you have to sit there and at least go, okay, this is the question. You have to say it out loud a few times. Feel where it feels. Sorry. Figure out where it feels in your voice, where the words, where your natural cadence kind of goes. That's part of hosting. That's part of doing something like this. Is part of doing an ad read is figuring out how to say it so it doesn't sound like I'm reading from a cue card, or a note card in this particular instance. So yeah, overall, it was not an unpleasant experience, but there were a lot of problems with this. Now, what I'm thinking, they've basically shown us, in the trailer, they showed us 3 guests. Terry Crews, Ned from Spider-Man, and then a third person I can't remember. My guess is this is going to be a limited series. And depending on how well it does, they might continue it. But my guess is these first 3 episodes, if it continues, if the other 2 episodes are just like this, where Again, it's difficult to follow. The host seems kind of lifeless and robotic through half of it. And the guests seem a little bit overwhelmed by what's going on. Then I don't see this series continuing, which really sucks because, again, Spellslingers was so good. And Magic the Gathering has the Guinness World Record for being the most complicated card game in existence. It is unbelievably complex, and Spellslingers, I did not play Magic the Gathering before Spellslingers, or I had played it a few times on a computer game. And that was really it. I did not understand the game whatsoever. Spellslingers explained enough to make it easy to understand and easy to follow everything that was going on. This game simply didn't. There's no, like, there's no, what do they call it? Like when somebody uses a card, they don't like pop it up on the screen so you can read the whole card or anything like that. They did that in Spellslingers. They didn't really do that. They would close up on the cards every so often, but they never put like overlays or anything that would tell you what was going on. There was no overlay the entire time to help people to follow. I think a good overlay probably would have made this easier to understand because they just kept doing these wide shots of both of them playing with the table in between them, and it's really, because of glare and everything, it's really hard to see what was on everybody's bench. And then they would do these over the shoulder shots where you could see a little bit better, but you really couldn't tell what was going on almost at all. A quick overlay would have made things significantly easier. Having, cards pop up so that people can see, or like from Will Wheaton's tabletop style, having little cutaways that explain, by the way, this is how this particular thing works. They did the same thing for Spellslingers. None of that existed here. It was mostly just wide shots and over the shoulder shots and really rapid jump cuts. So yeah, like I think the show itself and the idea itself has a lot of promise. This particular format with this particular host, I don't think is going to succeed. Now, I could be 100% proven wrong. Again, it's possible that this was just, hey, this is the first time it's ever happened. Sorry, I had something in my throat. It's possible, again, it's possible that this was Allison's first hosting gig. It seemed like the way that she spoke and everything, other than saying Pokemon, she seemed at least more familiar with the card game than Terry was. So it's possible that she plays regularly, or at least had played more than Terry had. So again, this is not me saying that Allison is a bad host or anything like that. She did a poor job in this episode. The next episode, she may be significantly more comfortable now that she has one of these under her belt. She may get significantly better throughout the 3 episodes that they already have filmed. Or she might not. I don't know. But if I was to judge the entire series off of this first episode, I probably wouldn't recommend the series. I might recommend this particular episode simply because Terry Crews is in it, but I wouldn't recommend the whole series. Who knows if it gets better? Again, I don't know how often these episodes are coming out, if it's going to be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever. But I'm interested to see what the next episode is like, because I think this has given us a single data point, and you can't extrapolate from a single data point. Once you get at least 2, you can start your extrapolation to kind of figure out. But just from seeing this is a lot of... There's been a lot of money put into this in everywhere except the content itself. It is a very, very beautiful mess. Which again was kind of what happened at the end of Geek and Sundry, where they would just throw a lot of money at stuff thinking that made it better. And it really didn't. The writing wasn't there. It just kept getting worse and worse and worse because they thought, well, if we throw enough money at it, that means it's good. And no, there's a big difference between expensive and good. This was a very expensive show. I wouldn't call it a good show. It's fairly mediocre, but it's not horrible. I'm interested to hear what you guys think. I'll leave a link to the episode if you guys want to watch it. Yeah, I guess I should. I'll put in the title spoiler alert because I do say that Terry wins in this, and I forgot to say spoiler alert in this. So sorry if I spoiled the episode for anyone. But yeah, I'll put a link to the video in the description. Like I said, I'm interested to see what you guys think about it. Do you think I'm being overly critical on the host? Do you think I'm being overly critical on the format? Did you guys find it very, very easy to follow? Or were you like me, extremely confused for like half the game? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, is all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.